Is there a canine equivalent of the Uncanny Valley? Because that would be what I was feeling. The Call of the Wild is based on the classic novel by Jack London and is about a CGI atrocity posing as a St. Bernard named Buck. Buck gets stolen from his home and taken to be a sled dog for freight haulers in the Yukon. He goes on a few missions as a sled dog, and after about 50 minutes of that, the movie then moves on to being the story that it was marketed as. Buck crosses paths with an old man named John Thornton, played by Harrison Ford, and as the two go hunting for gold in the mountains, the dog might be finding his place in the world. I think I've already given away that I did not like this movie at all. I'm sure there are going to be families who find some enjoyment in this picture, but I'm sorry, this movie is bad. All of the animals are foolishly computer-generated with terrible results. The way that Buck looks and moves is awkward, and I could never buy the connection between him and Harrison Ford because I couldn't buy that the dog was actually there with him. There are these cartoony things that the dog does that, sure, you probably couldn't train a real dog to do, which does bring forward another pet peeve I have with the movie, no pun intended, but I'll get to that in a minute. But if you're going to make the dog this cartoonish, just make the whole movie a cartoon. Heck, the director of this movie is Chris Sanders, who has worked in various departments for many animated movies. His directed films are Lilo and Stitch, How to Train Your Dragon, and The Croods. This movie would have worked better had it been fully animated. It would have made a lot of the dumb things in this movie more tolerable, so why the sudden change for Sanders? And there are a lot of dumb moments in this movie. There's a part where the sled team is crossing a frozen lake, and Buck falls through the ice and gets carried away by the current underneath. The musher runs forward to where he thinks he is and starts breaking the ice with his fists, and someone, who is off-screen so we know who it is, hands him a wooden plank or something, and he's like, "Oh, thanks. Wait a minute." Yeah, putting aside the fact that the dog somehow swam against the current back there and broke through the ice himself without the musher hearing it, Buck seriously has the sense of humor in the moment to be like, "Here, you can use this to try to save me." And it's not just the animals that are awfully fake, some of the environments don't look real. There are two shots from above as Buck and John Thornton are rowing downstream, and the reflections are clearly artificial. The second one is the most obvious because you see the reflection of the moon in the water, but the moon is not mirrored. You see the craters and everything as you would see them in the sky. You'd think when we got to the year 2020, a movie with a $135 million budget could get a simple reflection effect right, but here it is in plain sight. This movie has two very different halves that do not work together whatsoever. I would say that it's really the first half of this movie that is so horrendous, while the second half is just mediocre. The second is where John Thornton saves Buck from his new owner, who is abusive of animals, and the two of them decide to go gold hunting. And during the journey, the dog's friendship with the sad old man helps put him back together, though again, I didn't feel anything because I never got used to the cheap effect. The first half is just the horribly CG dogs doing stupid things, and by the way, since when has anyone ever put a red retriever on their sled team? And even when it gets to the action, it ends abruptly. There's a part where the sled team are trying to evade an avalanche, and in the middle of the sequence, it cuts away to the people waiting at their destination, and after a brief moment, the team arrives. We don't see them get away from the avalanche, we're just supposed to accept that they did. But the thing that was most troubling and confusing is the way that the other dogs on Buck's team just disappear from the movie. During the first mission, Buck fights the current leader of the pack to take his place as leader. Buck is the victor, but for the rest of the trip, and the movie for that matter, that other dog is nowhere to be seen. He's not with the pack after that. Did they just leave him there in the winter cold to freeze to death after he lost his leadership? Sure, he was mean to Buck, but that's still really awful. But that's just the beginning. Halfway in, when the dogs get their new owner who's abusive, John saves Buck before he can go with the team to find the gold. The musher later shows up back in town without the dogs, saying that they ran away out there, and that's the last we know of them. Anyone would think that when John and Buck go searching for the gold themselves, they would search for Buck's sled mates in the meantime, but no, they don't even run into them. It's never addressed what became of those dogs. As far as we know, they're lost out in the mountains. What is wrong with this movie? And only appearing at the very middle and very end, the abusive owner is a villain that is lazily shoehorned in, and he is absurdly overacted by Dan Stevens. I will give the movie this, though. Harrison Ford is really good in it. He does a good job pretending like he's interacting with a dog. and there were 2 or 3 moments where he gets humorously frustrated with what the dog is doing that gave me a few chuckles. And along with Harrison Ford's performance, John Powell's musical score is also much better than this movie deserves. Overall, though, this is an unfocused, tonally confused retelling that has no idea what it wants to be. The humor is lame, the use of CGI is a joke, and the pacing and structure are lamentable. If you have kids who really want to see it, it is pretty harmless, though even at that young age, I probably would have lost sleep wondering what happened to those dogs. And to everyone else, save yourself the time and don't answer the call. Scoring on the Factor Facts, The Call of the Wild gets a 25%. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this review helpful. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.